Good morning, boys and girls. Today's screencast, you are going to be reviewing Chapter 6 Review. It's going to be just pretty much basically all the topics that we've learned so far, and you're just going to do a couple of examples in your math notebooks using the guided note sheet that should be glued into your notebook. So how this will work is I will review an example of each of the problems, and then you'll do an independent practice on your own. Let's get started. When we want to find the sum of two fractions, if you take a look at the example, we are going to want to find a common denominator first. So in order to do that, I have to look at the denominators that I already have, 4 and 8. There are two things that I can do. I can look at those numbers and decide what number could be divisible by both of them, or I could multiply them together to get a common denominator. I know that I can divide 8 by 4. I also know that I can divide 8 by 8. So I'm going to use the 8 as my common denominator. So I'm going to set that up. My denominator of 4 became 8 by multiplying by 2. So I'm also going to need to multiply my numerator by 2. 2 times 1 is 2. My 8 became a denominator of 8 by multiplying by 1. So whatever I multiply the denominator by to change it, I also have to multiply the numerator by. 3 times 1 is 3. Now that I have a common denominator, I can go ahead and add my fractions together. I'm still going to have 8s, and 2 plus 3/8 is 5/8. I cannot simplify, so that is my final answer. Go ahead and try the independent practice problem. Okay, subtracting two fractions. And if you guys need to pause the video to try the independent practice, that's fine if I'm moving too fast. But we're going on to subtracting two fractions now. Same idea, you still need to find a common denominator, except you need to make sure that when you're subtracting fractions that the larger fractional amount goes first. So you need to decide, is 1/4 or 3/8 larger? So if I'm taking a look at this, 1/4, pretty far away from being one whole piece. 3/8 sounds like it's a little bit closer. To double check, I could cross multiply. 8 times 1 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12. That makes 3/8 larger. So I'm going to go ahead and reset up my problem. 3/8 minus 1/4. When I subtract, I'm going to find another common denominator. I know that 8 can be divided by 8 and 4 can be divided by 8 as well. So I'm going to use 8 as my common denominator. This denominator of 8 stayed 8 by multiplying by 1. So I'm also going to multiply my numerator by 1 to keep 3/8. My denominator of 4 became 8ths by multiplying by 2. So I'm going to multiply my numerator by 2 as well. Now I can subtract. I'm going to remain with 8ths. 3 minus 1 is 1. So 1/8 would be the difference. Go ahead and pause the video and try the independent practice problem. Take a look at comparing fraction amounts. A couple of different ways that we can compare fractions. Just like in the example before when we were subtracting to find the larger fraction, you can cross multiply. So how I would cross multiply is I would take the denominator, multiply it by the numerator. 12 times 2 is 24. This 24 would belong to the 2 9ths. I would then take the other denominator of 9, multiply it by 3 to get 27. This 27 belongs to the 3/12. Whichever number has a larger amount is your larger fraction. I could also find a common denominator between 12 and 9. Well, I know that nothing times 9 will give me 12, so I can't use the number 12. But if I start to think about 12 times 2 is 24, is there anything that can be multiplied by 9 to get to 24? No. If I multiply 12 times 3, and if you need to do this off to the side, that's perfectly fine. 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. Is there anything times 9 that will give me 36? Yes, there is. 9 times 4 will give me 36. So I can also compare fractions by finding a common denominator. So I'm going to use 36. How did 9 become 36? I multiplied by 4, so I also need to multiply my numerator by 4 to give me 8. How did 12 become 36? We multiplied by 3, so I'm going to also multiply my numerator by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. If I have 8/36 or 9/36, how much do I have? Obviously 9 is greater than 8, so that would make 3/12 larger than 2 9ths. Go ahead and try the independent practice problems by pausing the video. Next, improper fractions to mixed numbers. When I am trying to change an improper fraction to a mixed number, I'm going to do one of two things. I can use division, or I can create wholes and then kind of count my leftovers. So I'm going to show you both ways. If I'm dividing, I'm going to take my numerator, put it inside, and keep my denominator on the outside. 1 times 8 is going to give me 8 when I subtract. 13 minus 8, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 is going to give me 5. So 1 5/8. I can't reduce 5/8, so my answer, or my mixed number, would be 1 5/8. I can also take a look at 13/8, and I can use a number bond to break it apart. So if I'm trying to make whole pieces, I'm going to take 8. I would have 8/8 to make 1 whole, and how much left over would I have? 5/8 to make all of the 13/8. So this would equal 1 whole and 5/8. So you get the same answer, whichever strategy is up to you. Go ahead and pause the video to try the independent practice. Last review, mixed numbers to improper fractions. A couple of different ways that we reviewed this one. I'm going to show you the trick that we used. When we take a mixed number, we're going to multiply the denominator by the whole, and then add on to the numerator. So 8 times 1 will give me 8. 8 plus 5 more will give me 13, which will give me 13/8. Go ahead and pause the video to try the independent practice. Once you are done with all of the independent practice problems on your guided note sheet, go ahead and glue it into your notebook and leave your notebook on the back counter.